All right, let's talk about Christmas when you're homeless. And I guess I'll just tell some stories about some Christmases I had while I was homeless. And you may have heard some of these stories. You probably ain't heard them all because I've done a couple of videos about this before. But so the thing with me is I spent so many Christmases homeless that they all kind of blur together. You know what I mean? So it's hard for me to... I couldn't tell you what year these things happened because, man, I had some bad ones, though. They're all kind of flooding back to me now. I'm having, like, flashbacks. But, so for someone like me, Christmas while being homeless is mostly an inconvenience. Because for me, I just... A normal functioning Manhattan is best for my business. Now, on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I would usually make some more extra money. But the amount of just foot traffic is like in a place like the Upper West Side in Manhattan where I was, that's mostly where I was working. And I guess for those not familiar with me and my story, I used to do portraits on the street while I was homeless. At first, I was telling jokes I wrote for $1 a piece. Then I started doing portraits and making a lot more money. So, for someone like me who's, the influx of tourism is good for business, but it's bad for everything else. You know what I mean? So, just getting around the city, getting my phone charged, getting stuff to eat, everything becomes 10 times more difficult. But, I wasn't complaining. Well, the weather is also a factor. December in New York City is cold. But, I felt, the financial aspect of it would make up for it. And so pretty much the whole month of December, when you're homeless and you're working on the street, is going to be a pretty lucrative month depending on the weather. If the weather's real bad, you ain't going to do good. And it also depends on what you're doing. When I was doing the $1 one joke thing, I was never really getting ahead. I'd get ahead by a couple of $100, but that I was broke the whole time I was doing that. But so I made another video yesterday, which I'll put up maybe later in the week, where I was explaining the worst winter I ever had while I was homeless. And I was on my computer doing like a reaction video type format where I'm showing y'all the weather and showing y'all the spots where I was sleeping on Google Maps. I go to the street view. I'll do that video later in the week, probably. But I was going to put that video up today, and then I was like, oh, let me just do like a Christmas while homeless video. So, depending on the weather, it could be rough, man. I've had some rough Decembers, dude, where I didn't make that much money. But overall, I'd say December it's pretty much my last opportunity to get my money up to last me through January and February, because January and February, when you're doing street art or street performing, is like a wasteland. It's desolate. There's January and February in New York. The weather's bad. And there's not many people around. Nobody wants to be in New York at that time. But so you ain't making much money. January and February, the hardest months. So in December, I would try to take advantage of all the, between Thanksgiving and New Year's is peak financial, in the winter in New York, between Thanksgiving and New Year's is when the only time in the winter where you're going to be able to get ahead. So you got to be careful at that time of year and be smart with your money and make as much as you can. And so that's what I would do. And if we were having a rough December, which would happen sometimes, I'm talking temperatures 10 degrees, for 2 weeks straight, you ain't making no money. You ain't doing nothing. You're spending money. It's rough. But so now, the first winter I was homeless, I went out on the street November 2nd, 2012 was my first day homeless. By the time Christmas came around that year, I was already in bad shape. This is how fast. If you don't know what you're doing and you're homeless, I was in rough shape, dude. I looked homeless. I was filthy. God, I hate even thinking about it. And the weather was rough, and I was unequipped for it. I mean, I've told the stories in previous videos, but I didn't have the right winter clothes. I was freezing my ass off. I was so unprepared, dude. And so that Christmas, it came around, and I do remember this one because I woke up Christmas Day broke, no money. And this is when I'm doing the dollar joke thing. And I'm like, I'm sick to my stomach right off the bat. I'm worried about getting food. You know, when you smoke cigarettes, you got to worry about buying cigarettes. So I woke up that day and I had enough money to either get coffee or like a sausage, egg, and cheese from McDonald's. I had like $2-3 to my name. And I was trying to decide which to do because normally under normal circumstances, I don't eat in the morning. But sometimes when I was homeless, I was thinking to myself, I'm going to be out there in the cold all day. I better eat something so I got fuel to keep myself warm. And so I woke up that morning but the coffee is like, that also kind of charges me up in the morning too. So I was like, I can either get coffee or food, and I'm trying to decide which to get. I'm in Penn Station, and I was sleeping on the train at the time, and so I wake up on I think I was on either the A or the E train. I don't remember. I wake up on the train. I ride it to Penn Station, and I get off, and as I'm getting off the train and walking through Penn Station, trying to decide, do I want coffee or like a breakfast sandwich, some like homeless outreach people come up and they're like, hey, do you want free breakfast? I'm like, yeah, for sure. They're like, we're doing it for Christmas and this and that. And they give me this styrofoam thing full of food. They're like, do you want 2 of them? I'm like, yeah, sure. That'll save me money for later in the day. So I took 2 of them. It wasn't good. I don't even remember what it was. It was some eggs and I forget. There was like eggs and maybe some sort of potatoes or something. I was happy to have it though because now I can get coffee too. And I was grateful for it. The food wasn't good. I wolfed it down, and I think I saved the other one for later. When it's that cold in New York, you can hold food all day. You're in a refrigerator. You know what I mean? You're living in a refrigerator. So I eat it, I get my coffee, and I'm in a pretty good mood. Now, I don't remember. I probably did all right that day, money-wise. I don't remember. But that was my first Christmas homeless. Now, another one, I told the story. I did. This is when I first had a YouTube. I tell this story in detail. I'll just tell it real quick right now. So I used to sleep at a church on the Upper West Side. This is years into being homeless. And it's Christmas Eve, and it's kind of, it's drizzling. It's hard to describe what it was doing. It was almost like fog, but a fog that's so heavy that it's like little dots of ice raining down. You know what I mean? It's cold out. And I set up in my spot outside this church, and right when I get all set up, I'm about to smoke my weed, I'm about to chill for Christmas. The dude who works in the church comes out. He's like, you can't stay out here tonight. I'm like, why not? He's like, we're doing a midnight mass. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, dude. And so I just pack my shit up and head off to the castle, which is kind of a hike. And it's like raining at this point. It's the worst weather possible, which is like, 38 degrees and rain. It's not enough to snow, but it's freezing cold and you're getting soaking wet. The upside to the snow is you don't get as wet. The rain is going to soak you. And I'm like, goddamn. So now in the rain, I got to pack up all my shit and do a 20-minute walk uphill to the castle because that's my other main spot for staying dry. There's some cover at the castle. Belvedere Castle is in the middle of Central Park. And so I'm like, God damn it. I pack up all my shit. I drag it up to the castle. Now, this could be, to be honest, this could be more than one Christmas story. I don't know. So I remember getting to the castle, freezing, wet, pissed off, dude. And so I set up, and the wind is so bad up there because you're at an elevated position at Belvedere Castle. The wind is so bad, I may as well not have cover because the rain's all blowing right in on me. So I set up my regular camp, but on top of that, I throw my poncho just on top of everything. And I wake up the next day, and it's so cold, and it's so wet, and the wind is so strong that if I didn't have hand warmers, I probably wouldn't have been able to pack up my stuff, because not only was it freezing cold out, I'm talking like in the 20s. There's ice and wet everywhere. All my shit is soaked. So as I'm packing up my shit, my hands are getting soaked, and it's like 20 degrees out. And the wind in this elevated position is almost like hurricane wind. I'll never forget this day. And so I had to open up a thing of hand warmers, which I prefer to save those for nighttime when I'm sleeping. I can put them in my sleeping bag and help keep me warm. But I had to waste a pack of them because my hands weren't even working. And so, every 10 minutes while I'm packing up my camp, I got to stick my hands in my pocket to make them function again, because they're not even working. They're so cold. And so what normally would take me 20 minutes, half hour packing up my camp took me about 2 hours. And I finally get everything packed up, and then I gotta drag my shit all the way to McDonald's, which I did, to get my coffee. McDonald's is like one of the only things open on Christmas. And I'll never forget it, because my hand felt like it was gonna fall off. I'm dragging this luggage behind me. My other hand's in my pocket with the hand warmers, but so I had to keep switching hands, dragging my shit to the McDonald's. Finally, I get there, I get my coffee, and I'm starting to, you got to realize how angry I was at the time. At the time, I was so bitter and angry. I'm thinking to myself, I didn't know how things were going to work out. For all I knew, I was going to be homeless for the rest of my life. I mean, so, as I'm walking to McDonald's, I'm thinking to myself, man, I worked hard my whole life. I did this and that. I was so pissed off at the position I was in. I was just disgusted, you know what I mean? And so I get to McDonald's, and it's Christmas, and I get there, I'm drinking my coffee, I'm starting to settle down. I'm less angry now, I'm warm, I got my coffee, and I'm feeling a whole lot better. As I'm sitting there drinking my coffee, I see this homeless dude, Jimmy, come stumbling up the block, and I know Jimmy well, and He's a heavy alcoholic, homeless dude that I've known for years. I like him. I like Jimmy. And so I see Jimmy come walking up. I'm watching him from like a block away. So I'm sitting at the front window of McDonald's. Jimmy's stumbling up 72nd Street, looking like he just got flushed down a toilet. He's soaking wet. I can tell he had a rough night. And so Jimmy comes into McDonald's, and I'm watching him the whole time, and he sits right next to me, and I'm chuckling. I'm like, Jimmy, you must have had a rough night. I was like, I thought I had a rough night. I was like, what happened to you, dude? Jimmy's like, Jimmy had this cave in Central Park where he used to sleep, and he's like, I was dead asleep, and all of a sudden, the water came rushing through my cave and basically washed me out of it. He's like, everything I got was soaked. He's like, I left all my shit there. He's like, everything's just like frozen to the ground. He's like, man, I barely survived last night. And he's shivering and he's half dead. I'm like, damn, bro. I gave him some hand warmers, and he's like sticking them in his shirt. I didn't have that many, but I was like, take some hand warmers, bro. You're gonna die. I think I bought him a coffee, because Jimmy never had money. If Jimmy had money, it was going to vodka. You know what I mean? So me and Jimmy just sat there warming up and drinking our coffee, and then I headed off to work, and probably had a decent day. Now, another real bad Christmas. Now, this is when I was staying in Harlem. I had a room at the YMCA, the Homeless Outreach People. Oh man, if this is going to be going on the whole video. I had a room from the Homeless Outreach People. This is what helped me get a room in the Bronx. The Homeless Outreach People, at some point, while I was on heroin, offered me a room And I always denied them. But these homeless outreach people were different. They were like, no, we're not going to get you a room at the shelter. We're going to get you a room at the YMCA where you can have your own room. I'm like, well, I'd be a fool not to take that, because if I had a room, I could kick heroin and I can get back on track. This is what I was thinking. When I get the room at the Y, I didn't kick heroin. I kept doing it. And so, and then they hooked me up with a room in the Bronx where I had to pay, but I didn't have to pay much, $200 a month. It's a room in the gutter in the Bronx. It ain't worth shit, but I was happy to have it because I could afford it. And so, but this is when I was staying at the Y at Harlem. Now, a funny thing happened. A buddy of mine called me up, and he told me, this is around November, he calls me up and he's like, or he emailed me. My phone wasn't even on. My buddy emails me. He's like, yo, Joey, I can get you a job if you want New Year's Day. He's like, my boss is hiring. You got to call people up and try to get them to take a loan. If they take the loan, you get a percentage of it. I'm like, that sounds good, bro. I'm going to take that. And but he's like, but we can't hire you till New Year's Day. This is the job I had in the financial district down in Manhattan. And I'm like, all right, I just got to, I'm doing $1 and one joke at this time. It's around 2014. And I'm like, all right, I just got to make it till New Year's Day. I'm not making no money with this $1 one joke thing. And I'm going to take this job. I'm happy to have it. I'm going to get my life together. And so the weather's real bad this year. And I'm not making no money hardly with the $1 one joke thing. So I think it was every Tuesday and Thursday maybe up in Harlem on, what's the name of that street? Nicholas something. It's a pretty famous street in Harlem. I think I forget, but there's a hospital there that's very famous. Anyways, I think every Tuesday and Thursday, this is on Harlem around 138th and the Nicholas Avenue, whatever. There's a hospital there where these homeless outreach people come. I think it's every Tuesday and Thursday. And they give free food. The food is trash. But when you're broke, you're going to eat it. And I'm a picky eater, bro. But it's jail food, basically. And it's a really disturbing memory for me. Because this was like... Hold up. He's working on this big mobile home thing that it sounds like a fucking aircraft carrier or something, and it's from like 1980. You can probably hear it sounds like it's from like 1980. But so I don't want to eat this food. I want to buy my own food, but I'm so broke that sometimes on Tuesday or Thursday I gotta walk up there and get the food and eat it, and I hated doing it, and it's a depressing thought. And so I'm just trying to make it till New Year's. I know my buddy's gonna get me a job. I'm still on heroin, so I'm doing $1 one jokes. I can't afford to even get the right amount of heroin every day to keep me high. So I'm like, for like I don't know how long, but I'm in a state of dope sickness like every day because I can't even afford to get myself right. But I'm not, I'm trying. So I'm getting like a bag or two a day, but it ain't really cutting it. It's not getting me, it's getting me just less sick. It was hell on earth. And I'm also feeling like a real loser because I'm spending my money on drugs and then going to these homeless outreach things to get the free food. I'm feeling, this is like the lowest point in my life. I'm feeling like such a loser, bro. And so Christmas Eve, I think it was Christmas Eve or maybe the day before Christmas Eve, I go to get the free food. And the other people there, you also got to realize you're in Harlem. It's a different type of homeless people in Harlem. They're nastier, they're more bitter, they're more angry, they're more broke, they're more desperate. These are the type of people who, if you look at them wrong, they'll try to kill you. So I would just go up there and not even talk or look at anyone. And they're all miserable. And depending on the day, sometimes there was like 10 other homeless people waiting for this truck to show up. Sometimes there was a bunch, like 30. And it was right before Christmas. There was a whole bunch of us there. And you also got to realize throughout my entire life, I didn't take handouts. I felt like I come from working class Irish Italian people where we don't take handouts. We're not beggars. We work. This is the mentality I grew up with. I see things differently now. But I felt like such trash. I felt like such a scumbag. I'm also the only white person there. And the other black homeless people are looking at me like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? And I'm thinking the same thing. What am I doing here? How did this happen? Like, how did my life lead me to this place? And it's surreal, bro. It's surreal. You never know. Life is crazy. Anyways, so I get my free food. It's this like soup with this like meat in it, which you don't even know what it is. For all you know, it's a cooked rat. But I'm thinking to myself, these are like charitable people. They're not going to do you like that. These are people who are trying to help the homeless outreach people. They're not going to spit in your food or nothing. But what are you going to do? You ain't got no food. You got to eat. Whatever it is, you got to eat it. I'm telling you, I'm a picky eater. But when you're starving, that pickiness goes right out the window. But not really, because you don't enjoy the food. You just you're eating it it's horrible. Anyways, I get the free food and they're like, it's right before Christmas. They're giving us like free socks and stuff. I'm taking the free socks. I'm feeling like such a fucking loser, man. And it was like the lowest point in my life. So there was that Christmas, and I go back to the why I eat my trash food. And the weather was bad. I couldn't even work right. But one of them days, I had to eat off that thing. I had no money. I had no cigarettes. I had no nothing. I wake up at like 7 a.m. the next day. I walked down from Harlem to Central Park, and I worked. And I'll never forget that day. This was still the same winter. And I work, and right off the bat, the money, it was a good day. I made maybe $50 that day. You got to realize, when you're doing $1 one joke, $50 is a good day. And so I do good that day, and I'll never forget, I went and got my favorite food. So here's a inspirational little message here. I'm telling you, the worst days of your life are usually going to be followed by some of the best. The universe balances out. So I woke up that day and I needed to make money. If I didn't make no money that day, I might have, who knows, I might have lost my will to live, because I didn't make no money the previous days. I'm eating this trash food, and I was just done, bro. I had no cigarettes, and so I wake up that day, and I knew I got to make money today, and I got to make a lot of it, because fuck this shit, And I did. It worked out for me, and let me tell you something. It was like winning the lotto. I got my favorite food that day, which is the halal guys, which it's my favorite food in New York for less than $10. You cannot do better than the halal guys. They got a cart in Times Square, I think on 53rd and 6th, and then they got a restaurant up on 96th, which is, I went to the cart. The cart's actually better, believe it or not. And I got my favorite food. I went back to my room in Harlem, and I was happy, man. I was just happy to not be eating that homeless trash food, and it put me in a real good mood. And then what ended up happening was my buddy did get me the job first day of the year, 2015. I go down to I take the train down to, what's the stop right there? It's actually a pretty famous stop right down by Wall Street. I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. But that's the stop I got off, and I was working on Maiden Lane down in the financial district. I show up, my boss Nate, cool boss, but the job didn't work out. I worked there till the summer, and then that was the end of that. I was so the week before I started that job, which it's between Christmas and New Year's, I ended up kicking dope. I couldn't afford to keep up with it. I couldn't even barely afford to eat. So that whole week, and actually the last day before starting that job, I guess it was New Year's Eve, it must have been, I go to my buddy Casey's apartment. Now, Casey, I've got a whole couple of videos about the legend of Ilya, and Casey plays a big part in that story. Anyways, Casey had an apartment in Harlem at this time. His girlfriend took his kid and left. She was done with Casey. Casey's a hard person to deal with, and I understand it. So Casey ain't paying rent, but he's trying to get everyone to come live in this apartment with him to chip in on the rent. And anyways, I ran into Casey in the park in Manhattan or something. He's like, "Come by tonight. I got some." He's like, "I'll get you a bag." I'm like, "Okay." And I go to Casey's that night, and he gets me the bag, and Ilya is staying over there. And I'm pretty sure I told the story in a previous video. But that was the last time I did dope. For the next week, I'm working this job. My first week at the new job, I'm kicking dope the whole time. It was a nightmare, bro. And then my buddy who I'm working with, I think it was the Friday right before. Now, Nate, I was supposed to wait 2 weeks to get paid, but my buddy Jordan told Nate, he's like, "Look, my buddy Joey ain't got no money. Will you just pay him for this week now?" And Nate's like, "Yeah, fuck it, no problem." And so Nate paid me, and so Jordan's back there at his cubicle, and I hear him say out loud. Now, Jordan used to be on heroin too. Jordan's one of my friends from Long Island. And I hear Jordan in his little cubicle, he goes, "I'm going to snort a sub and see if it gets me high." And my brain said, ding. I said, "Yo, let me snort a half of one and see if I get high." I had just kicked dope. Jordan's like, "Okay." He cuts one in half and he gives it to me. It's a Suboxone. I crush it up and I snort it up. And me and him are high as fuck. We're giggling, we're laughing, we're having a great time at work. And from that point forward, I'm doing like a quarter of a sub every day, not to get off heroin, but to get high. This Jordan's just hooking me up every day. And what ended up happening was the sub stopped getting me high, and then I went back to heroin, and and then this is 2015. Between 2015 and 2017, I was going back and forth between heroin and Suboxone, depending on what I could afford. You know what I mean? Until finally in 2017, I tell the story in a previous video. I ended up getting off heroin because it got to the point where I was so disgusted with everything that I just wanted to feel normal again. I had done a sub, maybe a half a sub, and then the next day I got a bundle of heroin. A bundle of heroin is 10 bags. And I'm thinking 10 bags will last me all week. But I was like a dummy. I still had this Suboxone in my system. I took that bundle, I snort a bag, it does nothing to me. I snort another one, nothing. I ended up snorting 9 bags, maybe 7, 8 bags, I don't remember. And I barely get high. This is the experience that got me off heroin. And this was around November 2017 probably. And I end up doing most of the bundle, which was supposed to last me all week. I ain't got no money. I could get a bundle in the Bronx for $60. It's a good deal. In Manhattan, it's like $100. And so I did pretty much the whole bundle, and it didn't even really get me high. It gave me this weird half high because I had this Suboxone in my system, and I was so pissed off and so disgusted with myself for wasting that $60 and not even really getting high, you know what I mean? And after that, and then the next day, I think I did the two other bags of heroin. Didn't really do the trick for me. And then the next day, I wake up and I get right back on the sub. Now, this was a mistake because I still had heroin in my system, which threw me into precipitated withdrawal. I had zero money. I had to go work that day. I'm in precipitated withdrawal in my room in the Bronx, wanting to die. I get in the bathtub. I feel like such shit. I'm thinking to myself, this was the experience. I'm like, I'm done with heroin. I'm done. I'm getting on Suboxone. I'm never touching heroin again. And that's that. I just want to feel normal again. And hopefully at some point in the future, I'll be able to get off the Suboxone. But right now, my main priority is to not do heroin no more. So it was that experience that really that nightmarish couple of days with the heroin and the Suboxone precipitated withdrawal, and I was done. I had to go work that day. I made a couple of bucks, just enough to get me some weed and some food and get me back home to where I can chill and try to deal with this dope sickness. And then the next day I felt a lot better, and I was grateful. I was done with heroin. I was just grateful to still be alive and to be starting to feel somewhat normal again. And that was it. I was done with the heroin. And I'm telling you, once you get to the point where I was at, it's not that hard to get off heroin. I was done. I got on the Suboxone, and I was content to just not be dope sick. And then a year or two later, I realized how past heroin I was. I got off the Suboxone. So, anyways, I can't think of any other Christmas experiences there were plenty. I just can't think of them. So this video has been a half hour anyway. So I guess that's the end of this one. Merry Christmas, y'all. I appreciate every single one of you. Thanks for the subs. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for the tips. Thanks for the Patreons especially. And if you want a response to your comment, try to get it within the first 30. And yeah, Merry Christmas. I'll be putting up a video or two before New Year's. So I guess everyone have a good Christmas, and I hope you get everything you want this year. Hopefully Santa will be good to you. So he's been pretty good to me lately. So I guess that's the end of this one. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you on the next one. Everybody have a good one.